We're getting ready to get back to work on our 68. Now this is going to be a higher end paint job. We're going to be trying to go to SEMA or Brothers Trucks with this and win everything. And so you're going to want to stay attuned and pay attention to how this one's done, because it'll be done differently than what we would be doing for just a natural daily driver kind of a thing. We let this sit as long as possible so that the primer and everything shrinks up as much as possible, and this way any defects will be coming to the head and we're going to be able to find them and fix them before we paint it. So I've gone ahead and I've taken all the dust off. Once I get all the dust off, then I'm going to go ahead and soak the whole thing up. I'm only going to do enough of an area that I can reasonably wipe it down in one period. I'll shoot it on like this. I'm going to let it sit for just a little bit so that it can work and get any handprints, fingerprints, grease, or any dirt that might get into my way. Because if I was to block sand this and it had any grease or anything on there, then I'm just going to be grinding that right into my paint. So I'm going to get this all cleaned up and everything, and then I'll show you what comes up next. So I'm getting pretty close to sanding. I've cleaned the outside, now I'm cleaning the inside. And whenever you're doing something like this, you want to start on your ugly side, if you will. Because if I was to sand my face, this here side here, first, and then I put it on the blanket and I was sanding this, then maybe if there were any imperfections or anything got onto my carpet or my blanket right here, it might jig into my paint job on the outside. So you always protect your money shot. Always protect your outside shot. So I'll be sanding the inside first, then I can flip it over and do the outside. If any imperfections happened on the inside, not that big of a deal, because not that many people look at the inside. I've cleaned it up again, because that's what you do in this, is you clean, clean, clean all the time. What was that sand I used to have? Hang on a second, we'll start this over. Now your fog coat, sometimes it'll not spray out evenly, it'll splurge out, there'll be wet spots, something like that. So we're just going to take our scratch pad right here and we're going to go over it once. What this will do for us is it will kind of help dry it up. And if there is any pits or anything like that, it'll help take the fog coat, guide coat, and shove it into those pits so we can find it easier. I'll clean this up again, and then I'll start sanding on it. Now this here is a brand new bedside, so we didn't really have to do any body work on it. All I did was try to get rid of all of the little spot welds on it so that it just has a really straight, super look to it. Now most of the time I will not be using a jitterbug, but because this is a brand new bed and it's all pretty nice and straight, I can use a jitterbug on this. I've already block sanded it one time. So I'm using some 220 on my jitterbug pad right here, and I'm going to do this in a little bit of a pattern, because what happens if you leave a jitterbug in one spot too long, that's what's going to happen. So I can get all of this really wavy if I don't do this properly. So you want to do it a little bit like this. Now you're really going to be sure that you're backing me constantly, because what's happening is it's just going into the air, and it's going to get into every little nook and cranny of your garage, and it's going to fill it up, and it's going to make it dirtier, so when you have to paint, it's going to take you a lot more time to clean it off. So clean, clean, clean. I've got the mass of everything sanded on my inside, so now I'm just going to go back and hit little areas that are left. So I'll just use either a small sandpaper piece like this right here, or I'll use a scratch pad like this right here. Then I will go ahead and flip this on the other side, and I will show you how we do the outside, because it'll be just a little bit different. Inside's all done. Now we're going to go ahead and start on our money shot, the outside. When you get your table, make sure that it's a good height for you. You're not bending over too much and killing your back. When you're getting it on the table, you make sure you have a blanket so that no damage happens to the other side. And when you're putting it on the table, you want to make sure you put it on there a certain way. So see right here at the edge, if I was to take this bed panel and I was able to have it all the way up here, it takes this and makes it want to warp on up. So if I sanded it and then I take it off, then it'll kind of change the shape. So I just want to have this right here kind of tuck up right up on the edge of the table, but not apply any upward pressure. I'll do the same thing in the front. I'm going to clean this, yes, one more time on the outside, and then I'll be using the longest block sander I have, which in this case is a 3-footer. So stay tuned. Get my block sander all set up. We're using 150 grit sandpaper on this. That's what you're going to be doing most of your block sanding with. And what we're going to be doing is starting with the largest block sander we have and doing the largest open areas possible. So that's going to be all of this right in here and all of this right up in here. Now you might call this a block sander, and it is, but the problem is that it's too small. If I was trying to get a really straight all the way across this, I could achieve it with something small like this or something small like this, but nothing is going to get it as straight as a 3-foot long block sander is. So we're going to get all of our block sanding done with this, then I'll move down to a little bit smaller block sander and I'll finish off these kind of areas here. Then I'll use a smaller block sander and I'll finish off areas like this, and then even a smaller block sander to whatever's. And then I'll even do a hand pan to get my last little nooks and crannies set up. So give me a few minutes here and I'll show you what it looks like step by step. All right, we've got a couple of little shiners that are going on here. I got a little shiner here, little shiner here, little shiner here. I don't have anything going on right here. I don't have any shiners here. So I know I got to take this down just a little bit, this down just a little bit more. So after I get all of these large open areas done, then I'll go ahead and I'll do these curved areas. Now, when the sandpaper is brand new, if you were to do the curved area first, it would wear the sandpaper out faster and it would sand down the edge abnormally fast, if you will. So when the sandpaper's nice and fresh and thick and it's cutting really well, that's where you do your hardest work on your edges. This is easier work, easier sanding. So we're going to do this when the sandpaper is a little bit worn out but still has some life in it. Got all like 3-foot long block sanding done, got all this long 3-foot long block sanding done. I've done all my block sanding with my 1.5 foot, whatever this is. Now I'll go ahead and I'll move down to this guy, and what we're going to be doing is just finishing off edges like this to make sure that they're all straight and don't have any weird segues or waves in them. Then I'll move down to even one smaller than this and hit some of these other little things. So almost done. After I'm done with this little guy, I'll make a little hand pad, I call them, like about the size of this. Then I'm going to go ahead and hit this edge right here. Again, we'll be going at a 45-degree angle. I'll hit it from one angle, then I'll come back and hit it from the other angle. And I'll just keep going back and forth until, just like the rest of everything else, I get a little bit of a shiner on that. I got one last step, and then we're going to be ready for primer. So lastly, I'll get a little bit of piece of sandpaper like this, fold it over, and I'll sand out this groove. And you need to do this because each time you're primering, this groove is getting filled in with more and more primer. And if you don't sand it, it's just going to fill in, and you're going to kind of lose the distinction of that line. So you're going to have to go back on all of your lines that are similar to this and make sure that they are cleaned out and sanded out. So you got like that there, you got like this right here. So I'm basically done with this, and you can see what it looks like when we're done with it. A nice even smattering of shiners here and there. And we know when we're done with this. So let's say, for instance, we were just doing a nice decent daily driver and this was flat enough. We could actually paint this. We'd shoot a sealer coat on it, a color on it, and be done. If we were using a simple color, black, white, yellow, there's no pearls in it or anything like that, more than likely we would not have a problem. But if you are shooting metal flake or pearls, a lot of times if you have this kind of a spotty thing where you've got a patch of Bondo here, filler, you got a little bit of metal here, so on and so forth, you might see an anomaly around that. It might phantom up on you. It may not be visible to most people, but if you're doing a higher end, they're going to be taking really picky looks at your vehicle. So you have to make sure that when our final sand happens, we'll block sand these things 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, depending on how high we're going on their scale. But what we ultimately want to see is that when we block sand this and we get baby shiners, it's basically just blue, blue, blue. We don't want patches of filler coming up here. We don't want large patches of metal. We want nice and blue when we get done with our final sand. So this is going to need 1 or 2 more block sands to be finally complete, but it's coming along, and each time it gets just straighter and straighter and straighter. The first time you do it, you're thinking, hey, that looks pretty good. But each successive time, it just looks bitchiner and bitchiner. Next class is going to be on how to primer these up, so stay tuned, yeah?